Have you been told your facility might need to submit a TRI report this year? If you're watching this, you're probably trying to understand what that means and what it's like to hire a consultant for TRI reporting. What happens when you reach out, how involved it all is, what typically costs, and whether we'd be a good fit for your facility. So let me walk you through it step by step. Hey there, I'm Chris Ruhlin from RMA, your environmental experts. We work with industrial and manufacturing facilities across the country to prepare and submit toxic release inventory, or TRI, reports accurately and defensibly. So let's dive in. TRI reporting, required under the Emergency Planning and Community Right to Know Act, or EPCRA, applies to certain facilities in specific industry sectors that manufacture, process, or otherwise use listed TRI chemicals above regulatory thresholds. If you meet those criteria, you're required to submit an annual Form R, or in some cases a Form A, to the EPA. On paper, that sounds straightforward, but in practice, TRI reporting can get very technical very quickly. Part of the process is evaluating chemical thresholds across the calendar year. You're calculating quantities manufactured, processed, or otherwise used. You're tracking releases to air, water, and land. You're accounting for off-site transfers, waste management methods, and pollution prevention activities. And all of it has to be documented and defensible. For some, TRI reporting and all it entails are entirely manageable in-house. For others, it makes more sense to hire outside help for that. So what happens if you decide to reach out to RMA to help with your TRI reporting needs? You might fill out a form on our website, you might send us an email, or you might pick up the phone to give us a call. However you prefer to start the conversation, we're here to talk. That initial conversation is free, and it's not a scripted sales pitch. It's a practical back and forth. You get to ask questions about our process, experience, timing, and cost, and we'll ask questions about your operation, your material storage and usage, your tracking systems, and whether you filed TRI reports in prior years. The goal is to understand your situation accurately, not rush through it. And if you're not even sure whether TRI reporting applies to your facility, that's part of the conversation. We'll walk through the thresholds with you and help you determine whether this is something you likely need to file. We're not in the business of stretching applicability just to create work. If it doesn't apply, we'll tell you. If it does, we'll explain why. Because TRI reporting is fairly technical and tied closely to how materials actually move through your operation, in most cases, we'll likely conduct a site visit to start things off. While some facilities have strong internal tracking systems and organized production data that allows us to complete portions of the work remotely, most often we'll come out, walk the facility with you to confirm details prior to submitting your information. When we're on site, we're respectful of your time and operations. We'll review chemical storage areas, production processes, waste handling practices, and any existing tracking systems you might have. We're there to understand how materials move through your operation so we can handle the technical analysis and ensure your reporting is accurate and defensible. Once the data is compiled, we perform the threshold determinations, complete the release hold pathways and waste management calculations, prepare the appropriate EPA forms, again, R or A, and submit them through the TRI-ME web system or TRI-ME web system. We maintain documentation to support the assumptions and methodologies we use to get to these numbers. So if your report is ever questioned, we're prepared to defend your answer. Some clients engage us once a year for preparation and submission. Others prefer broader support, helping refine internal tracking, reviewing process changes over time, or integrating TRI into a larger compliance strategy. We can scale our involvement either way. Now, let's talk honestly about how we help companies. TRI in theory applies to many operations, but in practice, not every facility will trigger the need to report. If, after reviewing your operations, it turns out you don't meet applicability requirements, we'll tell you that you don't need us. At the other end of the spectrum, if you're a very large organization operating hundreds of facilities, each with hundreds of listed chemicals, you may require an enterprise-level consulting structure with larger teams built specifically for that scale. That's simply not how we're structured here at RMA. Where we're typically the strongest fit is in the middle. Mid-sized companies operating 1 to several dozen facilities that need to report 1 to several dozens of listed chemicals. Companies where TRI calculations are complex enough that getting it wrong could create regulatory or public relations risk, but that don't need a 50-person global consulting team solely focused on TRI. In terms of pricing, TRI reporting costs depend on a handful of variables: the number of reportable chemicals, the complexity of your processes, the quality of your tracking data, and whether prior reports exist. If you'd like a realistic sense of cost before reaching out, we have a dedicated TRI repricing page with free interactive calculators. No email or personal information required. On that page, we lay it all out: realistic price ranges, example scenarios, what drives cost up or down, common questions we hear, and what you should expect when hiring a firm like ours, so you can go into the conversation informed and confident. And if you're earlier in the process and still trying to understand TRI thresholds, chemical listings, Form R versus Form A, or how release calculations work, we also have a TRI Learning Center filled with articles and resources designed to help you understand the requirements before making any decisions. When you're ready, start with that first conversation. We'll talk it through, answer your questions directly, and figure out whether it makes sense to move forward together. If you'd like RMA to handle your TRI reporting, reach out to us. We'll take it from there.